The southern Ukraine port of Kherson has become the first major city to be captured by Russia's invasion. President Volodymyr Zelensky has insisted his nation will remain defiant. The United Nations says 1 million refugees have taken shelter by fleeing to neighbouring countries in just under a week, making it the swiftest exodus of refugees this century. As the bombardment continues, Ukrainian officials say more than 2,000 civilians have died since Russia's invasion began. Moscow has revealed that nearly 500 of its troops have been killed. The International Paralympic Committee reverses its decision and bans Russian and Belarusian athletes from the Beijing Winter Games.
Russia says it has seized Ukraine's southern city of Kherson, but the claim has not been confirmed. The United Nations Refugee Agency says more than 1 million people have fled Ukraine since the start of Russia's invasion of the country last week. In Taiwan, power is slowly returning after a problem at a main production center left 5 million people, mainly in the south, without electricity. And in Sudan, exports dropped 85% in January, partly because of international sanctions ordered against the country's military rulers.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine entered its second week on Thursday as casualties mounted on both sides, and the United Nations said more than 1 million people have fled the country. All eyes are on a second round of talks between Russia and Ukraine, as U.S. officials said the Russian military's advance on the capital Kyiv seemed to be stalling. Russia has stepped up its assault on Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, and other areas. The UN says it's so far confirmed 227 Ukrainian civilian deaths as of Wednesday and expects the number to rise. But Ukrainian authorities say the toll is significantly higher at more than 2,000. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry released its first statement on casualties. It said 498 of its troops have been killed. This map, produced by a U.S. think tank, shows areas said to be under Russia's control in red. Russia's defense ministry has announced it has taken full control of the southern city of Kherson. A senior U.S. Defense Department official said as of Tuesday, Russia had committed more than 80% of the forces it had amassed in border areas before the invasion. And Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby said on Wednesday that Russian troops heading south toward Kyiv had not advanced much in the last 24 hours.
The northern push by the Russians down towards the south, towards Kyiv, remains stalled. They haven't, from our best estimates, have not made any appreciable progress.
But he suggested that Russian forces may regroup and intensify their assault on the capital. Russian negotiators are at the border between Belarus and Poland for a second round of talks with Ukrainian counterparts to end the fighting. The first talks ended without agreement.
We are ready for talks, for diplomacy, but we are not ready to accept any Russian ultimatums.
Ukraine's foreign minister said Russia's demands remain the same as those President Vladimir Putin announced before the invasion. Putin insists that he wants the demilitarization of Ukraine, and he wants a promise it won't join NATO. One Ukrainian who fled from the capital Kyiv made an appeal for help in a video message to NHK World.
We have no lights here because we are under threat of bombing again. This city has been shelled on the first day of the war, and we need to be careful to stay safe and to stay alive, actually.
Snezhana Pushkar fled from Kyiv 2 days after the invasion started. She now lives at her friend's apartment 40 kilometers from the capital. Pushkar first heard about the invasion from her mother, who called in tears from her home near the borders with Russia and Belarus. She spent the first 2 days sheltering in a bathtub. She says she could hear explosions and sirens. Her biggest concern is the safety of her parents and her sister, who is pregnant.
The city is under permanent attack of Russian troops. They has been shelled, I don't know, like so many times a day. My family, they spend almost all the day and night in the basement to keep safe, to try to save their lives. And my family is my parents and my sister. She is about to give birth in 2 weeks.
Pushkar says she wants the world to know about Russia's brutality and take action to stop it.
I ask you, everybody who will see this, to pray for Ukrainians. We don't deserve it. Nobody deserves it. And this is an awful... This is the worst thing that could happen to anybody. And we need to stop Russia, and we will do this. Please help us.
The International Paralympic Committee is barring athletes from Russia and Belarus from competing in Beijing.
In order to preserve the integrity of these games and the safety of all participants, we have decided to refuse the athlete entries from RPC and NPC Belarus.
The announcement came one day before the games open. It reverses Wednesday's decision to allow the athletes to compete as neutrals without flags or anthems. That plan was widely condemned. Members of various national Paralympic committees threatened to pull their athletes. The IPC said the situation would make it impossible to ensure the safety of competitors in the athlete villages. The Russians had already been stripped of their flag as punishment for systemic doping violations and would have competed for the Russian Paralympic Committee. This latest move addresses worldwide scorn for the Russian invasion, supported by its ally Belarus. More than 80 athletes from both countries will now miss Friday's opening ceremony. Ukraine's Paralympic delegation gave its first news conference in Beijing after the IPC's announcement.
I want to say thank you very, very much, board of IPC, for make very important decision.
The delegation had expressed gratitude to countries supporting Ukraine. He said it's difficult for the athletes to compete at a time when their compatriots back home are dying in a war. He called for all participants to strive for peace and an end to the war by competing in the Paralympics together. Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich says he'll sell the English Premier League's Chelsea Football Club. There are growing calls within the British Parliament for Abramovich, who is said to be close to President Vladimir Putin, to be included in economic sanctions against Russia. Abramovich amassed his fortune by trading in oil and other products after the collapse of the Soviet Union. He bought Chelsea in 2003. The team used the abundant financial resources he provided to lure many top players and has won 5 Premier League titles. Last month, it won the Club World Cup for the first time. Abramovich said in a statement on Wednesday that he believes the decision is in the best interests of the club, fans, employees, the club's sponsors, and partners. The sale may be an attempt by Abramovich to sell his UK assets before being hit with sanctions. Now to the coronavirus situation here in Japan. Quasi-emergency restrictions are in place across much of the country. They're due to expire this Sunday, but government leaders now say they'll keep them in place for longer in many prefectures.
In these prefectures, growth in Omicron cases is starting to slow down. But hospital bed occupancy is still high. We heard the views of local governments and decided to take a cautious approach.
A quasi-emergency is in place in 31 of Japan's 47 prefectures. The government plans to keep it for 2 more weeks in 18 prefectures. Those areas include Tokyo, Osaka, Hokkaido, and Aichi. Officials plan to lift the restrictions in 13 prefectures where new coronavirus cases are coming down. They'll consult public health experts on Friday before making a formal decision. The quasi-emergency allows local governments to take targeted anti-infection measures, including asking bars and restaurants to close early. Kishida also said the government will allow more people to enter the country. Japan currently limits the number of people coming in each day to 5,000. Kishida said that'll be 7,000 from March 14th. The limit encompasses foreign visitors and Japanese nationals. Kishida said officials will consider a new framework to give priority to foreign students. About 150,000 people have not been able to get into Japan to study. Some have been waiting for 2 years. On Thursday, officials across Japan confirmed more than 70,000 new coronavirus infections and 255 deaths. Over 1,400 people in Japan are in serious condition. A special envoy of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations is slated to visit Myanmar later this month. He'll be the first ASEAN envoy to travel to the country since the military coup to mediate talks among all parties in Myanmar. Cambodian Foreign Minister Pra Sokong will start his 4-day visit to Myanmar on March 20th. It has not been announced with whom he'll meet. Some ASEAN member states are strongly urging Myanmar's military to allow the envoy to meet with pro-democracy representatives, including Aung San Suu Kyi. The ousted leader remains detained. But the military has rejected these requests, calling Myanmar's pro-democracy National Unity Government and others terrorist groups. Pra Sokong hopes to realize dialogue with pro-democracy bodies, but he's also keen to engage in talks with Myanmar's military. It looks like a bit of a roller coaster ride in terms of temperatures in the United States. Our meteorologist Sakamori has a look at the forecast in World Weather.
Hello there. Temperatures will be up and down dramatically over the United States as well as Canada this week. The western areas will see a significant cool down, while the eastern areas will see a big warm up as we go into the next several days. We saw about 30 degrees Celsius in parts of California on Tuesday, but temperatures will drop as this frontal system moves down towards the south. Meanwhile, cold northerly winds are pushing temperatures down along the eastern seaboard. For example, New York could see a high of only 8 degrees on Thursday, 4 degrees on Friday, but then going up to 20 degrees on Sunday. Meanwhile, Las Vegas, 27 on Thursday, dropping to 13 degrees on your Saturday. Meanwhile, deadly floods took place in eastern Australia. We are still looking at more rainfall along the coast. Now, take a look at this video from several places. Thousands of residents were evacuated their homes in New South Wales and Queensland on Wednesday. Floods have killed at least 13 people so far. 4 of them died in Lismore. Many people are still stuck in their homes. Police expect more casualties as the searching operation continues. An East Coast low is still hugging the coast of New South Wales. More rain is in the forecast, but the peak seems to be over in the Sydney area. However, more rain is expected to come back as we go into Saturday in the Sydney area and also the Melbourne area. Meanwhile, temperatures are going to be as follows for the next 4 days in Japan. 12 degrees in Tokyo on Friday, jumping up to 18 degrees on your Saturday. According to the Japan Weather Association, cherry blossoms are expected to start to come out on March 23rd in the capital city of Japan. That's it for me. Stay safe.
3月4日金曜日朝7時。おはようございます。三宅民夫です。
大久保昭恵です。
三橋大樹です。
NHK 今朝のニュース、最新の動きを詳しくお伝えしていきます。ウクライナ情勢です。ロシアとウクライナの停戦をめぐる2回目の交渉が行われ、双方の代表団は 戦闘地域の住民のための避難ルートを設置する方針で合意したと明らかにしました。ただロシア軍はウクライナ各地で攻勢を強めていて、市民の犠牲が増え続ける中、今後の交渉で停戦につながるかは予断を許さない情勢です。
ロシアがウクライナに軍事侵攻して1週間となった3日、ロシアとウクライナの停戦をめぐる2回目の交渉がベラルーシ西部のポーランドとの国境付近で行われました。協議の後、双方の代表団は戦闘地域の住民のための避難ルートを設置する方針で合意したと明らかにしました。またウクライナ側の代表団は、住民が避難する地域では一時的に停戦する可能性があるとしていますが、期待した結果は得られなかったとも述べていて、近く3回目の協議を行うということです。ロシア軍は交渉が行われた3日もウクライナ各地で激しい攻撃を続けました。ウクライナの非常事態庁は、北部の都市チェルニヒウで集合住宅とみられる建物などが空爆を受けて少なくとも33人が死亡したと発表し、市民の犠牲が増え続けています。
ウクライナはどこで激しい攻撃を受けているのか、アメリカ国防総省の高官の分析が入ってきました。
この高官は3日、ロシア軍の激しい爆撃を受けているウクライナの都市として首都キエフと第2の都市ハリコフ、それに北部のチェルニヒウを挙げました。ロシア軍はこれまでに480発以上のミサイルを発射し、このうち半分近い230発以上がウクライナの領土内に展開させた移動式の発射システムから発射されたと分析しています。ロシア軍に掌握されたと一部で伝えられる南部の都市ヘルソンについては、現地では戦闘が続いており、陥落したというのはまだ早いと述べました。東部ドネツク州の要衝マリウポリについては、ウクライナ側が引き続き支配権を握っているとする一方、ロシア軍は都市を孤立させるため攻勢を強めていると指摘。首都キエフに向けて南下しているロシア軍の部隊については、動きが停滞していると指摘し、キエフから北におよそ25キロ離れた場所に引き続きとどまっているとの認識を示しました。
ロシアがウクライナとの協議を継続する姿勢を示しながらも各地で攻勢を強める中、今後の双方の交渉で停戦につながるかは依然予断を許さない情勢です。プーチン大統領の発言が入ってきました。
プーチン大統領は3日行われた安全保障会議で、ウクライナへの軍事侵攻について、我々の兵士がウクライナで戦うのはこの国を非軍事化させ、国境付近で核兵器なども含めて我々を脅かすことがないようにするためだと述べ、今回の侵攻を改めて正当化しました。その上で、特別な軍事作戦は予定通り計画通りに進んでいる。すべての任務が成功裏に完了していると述べ、軍事作戦は順調に進んでいると強調しました。一方、今回の軍事侵攻でロシア軍の兵士の死者が2日までに498人に上っていることに関連して、プーチン大統領は、我々は軍に誇りを持ち、戦死した戦友を常に覚えている。彼らの家族たちを支援するため、できる限りのことをするつもりだと述べ、死亡した兵士の遺族に一時金を支払うなどの補償措置を行うと明らかにしました。プーチン大統領としては、死者が増えることでロシア国内で軍事侵攻に反対する声の高まりを抑え込みたい狙いもあるとみられます。
日本政府の動きです。ウクライナを支援するため、非常用の食料や衛生用品、防寒着などの支援物資を送る方向で調整に入りました。
ウクライナに対し岸田総理大臣は、日本がウクライナの国民と共にあるという姿勢を強調し、国際機関と協力して1億ドルの緊急人道支援などを行うことにしています。政府はまずは 自衛隊が保有する物資などをウクライナに送る方針で、非常用の食料や衛生用品、防寒着などを支援物資として送る方向で調整に入りました。また、支援物資に防弾チョッキを加えられないか検討を進めています。政府は自衛隊が運航する政府専用機で隣国のポーランドに運ぶことを検討しており、近く関係閣僚で協議して決定することにしています。
日本を含む国際社会の動きです。日本、アメリカ、オーストラリア、インドの4カ国の枠組みクアッドの首脳によるテレビ会議が昨夜開かれ、ロシアによるウクライナへの軍事侵攻に対し緊密に連携して対応していく方針を確認しました。
岸田総理大臣をはじめクアッド4カ国の首脳は昨夜11時過ぎから1時間余りテレビ会議を開きました。この中で岸田総理大臣は、今回のロシアによる侵略は力による一方的な現状変更の試みであり、国際社会の秩序の根幹を揺るがすもので厳しく非難すると述べました。その上で、日本政府として G7 主要7カ国をはじめとする国際社会と緊密に連携して迅速に厳しい措置を打ち出しているほか、ウクライナへの支援にも取り組んでいると説明しました。会議では今回の軍事侵攻に対し、ロシアとの伝統的な友好国であるインドも含めた4カ国で緊密に連携して対応していく方針を確認しました。そして力による一方的な現状変更をインド太平洋地域で許してはならないという認識を共有し、自由で開かれたインド太平洋の実現に向けた取り組みを一層推進していく方針で一致しました。またクアッドの首脳会合を数ヶ月以内に東京で対面で行うことで一致し、成功に向けて連携していくことも確認しました。会議では成果文書となる共同発表もまとめられ、ウクライナ情勢に対処するとともに、インド太平洋地域で人道的危機などが起きた際に支援に当たるための情報共有システムを立ち上げることが明記されました。
新型コロナウイルスについてです。今月6日を期限にまん延防止等重点措置を適用している自治体のうち、政府は東京や大阪など18都道府県で今月21日まで延長する方針で、今日専門家に諮った上で正式に決定することにしています。一方、水際対策をめぐっては今月14日から1日あたりの入国者数の上限を今の5000人から7000人に引き上げることにしています。
新型コロナ対策のまん延防止等重点措置は現在31の都道府県に適用されていて、期限をあさってに控え、岸田総理大臣は昨日関係閣僚と扱いを協議しました。そして東京、大阪、愛知など18の都道府県では今月21日まで延長する一方、福岡や広島など13の県はあさっての期限をもって解除する方針を確認しました。延長の理由について岸田総理大臣は昨夜の会見で次のように説明しました。
全国的な感染状況については改善傾向がさらに確かなものとなっています。